Welcome to Media Spectrum, where stories still matter. So today we're going to be doing our first TV review on A Night of the Seven Kingdoms, the latest Game of Thrones spinoff. This was a real pleasant surprise for me. I was a huge fan of Game of Thrones for the first 4 seasons. And someday I will give a whole series overview and explain how and why it went off the rails after that, but you saw the show. Some people will defend it up through season 6. We all know how it ended. And then there's been House of the Dragon, which I've liked, not loved. I'm kind of with the group consensus that it definitely fell off but in the second season. And so here's hoping this show stays strong, because these series do have a tendency of starting really strong before falling off, but this is such a strong start that stands apart from the other series in ways I'll detail shortly. And I really like that they've announced they're going to be trying to keep to a consistent yearly annual release of this. I think that's one of the things that's plaguing House of the Dragon and so many TV shows nowadays. They take 2 or 3 years to make them and it loses the momentum. They're becoming too movie-like in that way. I really think TV is best when it's released annually, yearly, regularly, so we don't lose momentum. One of the things that really struck me about this show almost immediately was how much it felt like the perfect balance between early, like season 1, maybe season 2 Game of Thrones, and A Knight's Tale, that classic Heath Ledger medieval comedy, which I'll have to review at some point. But the initial concept of this is very similar to what happened in A Knight's Tale. So in A Knight's Tale, for those of you who need a refresher, Heath Ledger is a squire. His knight dies very early on, and so he dons the knight's armor and goes to these joust and other medieval competitions masquerading as this knight to earn a living for him and his friends. Now, in this series, Duncan the Tall does not pretend to be his knight that died, but he still ultimately takes his shield, takes his sword, tries to take his place to enter a tourney so that he can earn a living. Very, very similar starting concepts. I think they're also very similar in keeping a much more comedic tone. A Knight's Tale goes farther with a comedy. It is more of an outright comedy. We're not going into any Queen musical spots in this, but the series does such a good job of doing something that is more lighthearted, that is more comical, while still very much belonging in that brutal, nihilistic Game of Thrones universe that we've all come to know and maybe love. People have mixed feelings on it for sure. Another point I want to bring up is that across the board, the acting is excellent on this. It's my understanding there are several minor characters that auditioned for roles in Game of Thrones previously and never made it. And there's just a real passion coming from almost everybody involved on screen on this that you can totally feel. Of course, the standout is Dexter Soul Ansel, who plays Egg. And this is maybe one of the top 10 child performances I've seen. There have been some impressive ones over the years, so I don't want to jump into recency bias too much.
You are a knight of the realm, sir. You can say fuck that permission, rise into the list, call out Longthorn Tyrell, and turn his arsehole into a lance hole.
But yeah, this kid is excellent. The way he's able to tug at your heartstrings at one moment, be funny one moment. His delivery is perfect. His little facial expressions are perfect. He's so articulate and well-spoken, and yet in a believable way. There are kids that are like little professors, and he just gives that energy so much. And then we have Peter Claffey as Duncan the Tall. From what I understand, he's actually a former rugby player, which I can totally see. And he does such a good job of being, like, a noble moron in many ways, but a guy who you still really root for and want to follow.
Everyone's always told me I was stupid.
And? What?
What?
What did he do when people said you were stupid, sir?
What business is that of yours?
And I talked about the comedic tone. One of the things I don't love so much is the show's kind of obsession with toilet humor. It's something that even popped up in Game of Thrones many times. I don't know. I kind of feel like this writing, production level, everything is a little above and beyond that. I could have definitely done with a few less of the shitting and fart jokes, but that is what it is. One of the things I really like about this show is how it differentiates itself from Game of Thrones and House of Dragon, not just in terms of being more comical, but also the whole scale of it. Because instead of jumping around all over the continent, all over multiple continents possibly, following half a dozen, if not more, main characters, for the first time, we are focused on just one character. Nearly every scene in this show has Duncan the Tall somewhere on screen or just off screen. There's like one cutaway near the end. I think that's about it. He's virtually always there. This is very much his story, above and beyond all else. And then the idea to basically frame this entire season around this singular event of the tourney is fantastic. It is a very organic thing for someone trying to earn their knighthood to go into to get their start. It's also a really great way to introduce us to so many different characters who I'm sure we will follow up with in different ways over the following seasons. And I just really hope that they are able to kind of keep a similar format going forward of having each season built around something that brings people together. It's definitely going to feel different if we start jumping from location to location, mini adventure to mini adventure. Having each season kind of be built around one central adventure is something I loved and hope they maintain going forward. Because when you think about it, everything that happens in this season in Game of Thrones proper probably would have been reduced to a single episode. We saw different episodes in that show placed around a tourney, maybe one or two episodes at most. But by taking our time, we get to know these characters better, we feel more intimate. It makes everything matter. When the Game of Thrones typical violent shenanigans happen, they really matter, even though we haven't spent a ton of time objectively in the world. Even though, like, on a time, only a couple days have gone by versus weeks and months and years the past in the other series. It's all been with this small group of characters getting to know them. And so when the Game of Thrones stuff does happen in the last couple episodes, it really matters. We've come to get some attachment to these characters and care about them. Now, I talked about the humor of the show, and it's not just in the writing. I love how they use kind of cinematic language even to convey humor. You know, there will be these very beautiful, heavy, kind of mesmerizing shots of someone being knighted, and then a knight just kind of shrugging and saying, I don't know, you know, kind of undercutting all of it. It keeps setting up knighthood as this epic, larger-than-life, huge, noble thing, and then immediately undercutting it in some way or another. And it's not just humorous, but it's kind of showing Duncan's journey as he comes to realize that being a knight, it's not all noble. He's finding out how this world works in real time. So it's just such a beautiful touch. And then the last thing I can bring up without really getting into full spoilers is, again, the tone of this show, beyond just being more small yet intimate and being more focused and being more lighthearted and humorous, is also there's a heart to this show. Like, there's a humanity to this show. And it does such a fine job of still very much being grounded in this brutal Westeros world where terrible things can and will happen. And yet, in this world, there is still seemingly some room for hope. At least so far, this series doesn't make you feel like an idiot for thinking maybe something nice will happen to good people. In this show, we actually do see good get rewarded. We do see good beget more good. We do see someone try to do nice things and then have people recognize it and respond positively to it. And I think it's something that would fit very well in today's world right now, regardless of greater context. but especially in this universe. Because, I mean, think about it. Game of Thrones is one of the bleakest, most nihilistic universes in all of pop culture, other than maybe The Walking Dead. The original Game of Thrones spent years, literally years, teaching the audience over and over again that if you try to be noble, you're going to die. You're probably going to get your whole family killed. You're probably going to see horrible, unforgivable things happen if you try to be good. And so, in a creative universe that is this brutal, to kind of turn the other way and start being positive, I just think it means a lot more. It hits a lot harder. So to go into more spoilers now, with the way the season ends, they are very clearly setting up this greater war that's going to take place. I'm not the sharpest on Game of Thrones lore, but I think this is about 100 years or so before Robert's Rebellion. Well, it's about 100 years before the original Game of Thrones. It's probably like 80 years or so before Robert's Rebellion. So we're not quite there yet, but we're seeing all these pieces in place. We are seeing how hated the Targaryens are by everyone. But I really do love the irony that almost all of this chaos that happens in the show comes from the Targaryens' fragile ego. You know, they try to say that the dragon puppet show is showing seeds of rebellion, when honestly, if they had laughed it off, it would have been fine. But the fact that he breaks her goddamn finger in half, makes Duncan attack him, and then all the chaos that comes from there, to the point where now at the end of this, one of the princes is maimed, and the younger brother, who everyone thought would be a great king one day, is now dead, is because of their own ego. And so, yeah, that puppet show did end up becoming kind of the start of a rebellion, I think, because of their reaction to it. Because they just could not take any criticism and reacted with violence. And of course, this has zero real world implications. This does not apply to anything going on right now at all. This is purely fiction that you should not take seriously at all. Anyway, beyond that, one of the... I don't know if I even want to call it... It is a little bit of a concern about the show going forward. Is one, like I said, are they going to start breaking into more story threads as is consistent with Game of Thrones? Or are they going to keep it focused on Duncan and Egg? And I really hope they keep it focused going forward. While maybe having an occasional flash to somewhere, like they did at the very, very end of this season. I was fine with that. I also really am curious to see what's going to happen with Egg in regards to that prophecy we get. I have not read the book this is based off of, but when I heard the prophecy talking about how he was going to die and worms would feed upon the ashes and everyone would be glad, I started thinking, he's not the Mad King, is he? So I looked it up and from some lore, and yeah, he's not the Mad King. That's not what they were referring to, but he's like an ancestor to the Mad King. And so they've pretty much told us, like explicitly, this hardly is even a spoiler, but I'll still put it here for people who haven't watched the whole show yet. They've pretty much explicitly told us that this guy, he's going to have a heel turn. And it makes this whole first season kind of have almost a little bit of a Phantom Menace feel, in that we're watching a kid who we know is going to grow up to be Darth Vader. And in this case, we're watching a very likable young kid who we now know is going to end up not that way someday. And I'm very curious to see how that story goes. That story feels very appropriate for the Game of Thrones universe. But like I said, one of the things I love about this show that's different from Game of Thrones is the very real and consistent sense of humanity and heart they have. And so I hope they're able to tell that story in a way that's not just totally nihilistic, and also that Sir Duncan does in fact stay a true knight the whole time, that he never succumbs to the dark side or anything like that, because that would be a little too much, I think, for this show. In a final note, I really like how we don't actually know whether Duncan was ever knighted or not. The show's not too in your face about it, but there are tons of little clues in here that he may well have never actually been knighted. And they're doing such a good job of planting those seeds while not making it explicit. I kind of hope they don't answer it. I kind of hope that it's just this lingering question we have to ask ourselves. And that if they do choose to answer it, that they wait till like a series finale or something, that they wait till very deep in the show to answer it. Because it's such an interesting little question that's fun for fans to theorize about and could fundamentally change the way you feel about Duncan quite a bit. I personally kind of like to believe that he was not, in fact, knighted, just because I think that makes him a more complex and interesting character. And whenever there are gaps for us to fill in things we don't know, I personally like to try to find the most interesting, complicated way, because I just think that makes it for a better story. So in conclusion, I'm a huge fan of this first season of A Knight of the Seven Kingdoms. I really hope they can maintain this quality, maintain this pace, keep it coming year after year, keep it short, brief, to the point like this. The fact that it's 6 episodes that are about half an hour each, this was practically a movie. You could easily edit this into a 2.5, 3 hour movie. So I kind of appreciate the brevity of it, and that'll keep it shorter and keep it more focused, I think. So keep the series short, keep it focused, keep the heart, keep the humor, maybe a little less toilet humor. I think the show's smarter than that, doesn't have to revert to that as often. But otherwise, yeah, big fan, and that's about all I have to say on this. So anyway, thanks to you guys for tuning in to my first TV series review. I'll be back to the movie reviews next week, and check in with me on Friday when I start my Guardians of the Galaxy trilogy series. I'll see you guys next time. Until then, stay sane, stay human.